Hello, I'm Sister Kathleen, and a few weeks ago I spoke about how we can try to help the bitterness, you might say, the divisions of our time by speaking with respect to one another, especially about hot topics, not presuming that we know the other person's point of view, that they necessarily share my point of view. So recently, actually, somebody asked me a question from the other side. What do I do if someone speaks to me that way? In other words, somebody presumes that I have the same opinions as they do, and in effect, that can be painful. It can make me feel like I'm, with the political opinions I hold, or whatever they might be, that somehow I stand outside the pale for this person. My views are outside the pale. They've just perhaps been ridiculed, or at least spoken of dismissively. So doesn't that put me outside the pale? So that's a painful thing to experience. And the same person was also asking me, and then what about, just feeling that I can't express my points of view because they're, or can't even admit to them, rather. We don't always need to express them, but can't admit to them because they're unacceptable. I might be ostracized. Well, it's not easy, and a lot can depend on circumstances, of course. But I just recently came across something in one of the fathers of the church, St. John Chrysostom, who wrote extensive homilies on the Gospel of Matthew. And at this point, he's commenting on chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, and looking at the Beatitudes and the verses after that. And he points out the verse right after the Beatitudes. Some say it's a beatitude, but I believe it's a commentary on the last beatitude. Blessed are you when people revile and curse you and speak all manner of ill things of you for my name. Rejoice and be glad in that day, for your reward is great in heaven. Well, that sounds great, super. So we should all just be courageous and, not always appropriate, not always the best thing to do. Plus, there's that little kicker. Revile you for what you do in my name. Well, good Christians can hold different points of views about things. So how can I be sure that my point of view is Jesus? Well, of course, I can't. But what I can perhaps do is be sure that if I speak with humility, with respect, but state my truth gently so that others understand where I am, then I may risk ostracization, but I am speaking in that way as in my faith in Jesus, because I am speaking the truth. I am letting my truth be known, and it can be very, it can add to our burden if we feel that we cannot speak our truth. And so we can try it and see what happens. Now, it may be that reviling or ostracization of one sort or another does happen. And if that is the case, we can examine ourselves. Did I speak with due humility? Did I speak respectfully of other people and the way they hold, the truths that they hold, the views they hold? And if so, then I hopefully can indeed rejoice in the freedom that comes from being in the truth. Now, Chrysostom also points out that a few verses later, we get the line, "Let your light shine before people, so that they may see your good works and glorify your heavenly Father. Oh, that's lovely. So what are these? He points out that this is a discrepancy. In the one case, they're going to revile us, and in another case, they're going to glorify God for what they see in us. Well, what's going on here? Well, when do people see, he's aware that, for instance, pagan values might be very different from Christian values. So he's writing in a society that's increasingly Christian, but there certainly are still people who are not Christian in the society. And so what he says, his belief is that these people may see the good works of Christians, and even if they may not admit it, they may be struck by them in some ways. Now, the reality is the world's values are not always the same as the gospel values. And we know very well that in our time, things that Christians respect and hold and they make a stand on are actually not things that a lot of the world respects. The world may think it's silly or stupid or even sometimes evil. So how does our way of life then, how can that bear witness and glorify the Father? Well, Chrysostom says a few things. One thing that he says is that there may be some level on which they are still struck by it. It might be unconscious even. Of course, he doesn't use the term unconscious back in around 400 or the late 300s when he was writing. But on some deep level, it may speak to their inner truth. The other thing he says, though, is what are these good works? Well, essentially, it's living the Beatitudes. It's being poor in spirit. It's being merciful. It's being a peacemaker. It's being pure of heart. These are the qualities that are going to speak to other people's hearts. He also mentions, which was still a not very distant memory in his time, he also mentions martyrdom, or giving up one's possessions, or being willing to die for the faith. So that's obviously a very strong witness, and one mercifully most of us are not called to bear. But being pure of heart, being a peacemaker, being humble, those are things, and being merciful, those are things that will speak to people on a deep level. And those are things that with God's grace we can do.